Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, we continue with the story of LyTuDiep and James. After many ups and downs in life, the two made a decision that surprised everyone. They chose to live together. Not because things were easy, nor because they were ready, but because, in their hardest moments, they realized they needed a place to hold on to. A home to return to. On the first day, the small house on the outskirts was silent, except for the sound of wind passing through the old window. Diep quietly packed her clothes and a few personal items. James fumbled with the broken power socket, trying to fix it. Neither knew what to say, but both were silently trying to make things better. Living together wasn't as rosy as they had imagined. Each day came with new challenges. Expenses, work, daily habits, responsibility for the child. And those quiet moments between two people who were once strangers. Yet, it was exactly those small things that slowly drew them closer. Diep woke up before dawn to prepare breakfast. James repaired every loose wooden plank on the fence, carefully adjusting each detail as if he were rebuilding his own life. No words were needed, both understood. Living together isn't just about sharing a house. It's about accepting each other's pain, learning to trust again, and daring to open one's heart one more time. Stay tuned for today's video to see what happens next in their story. Will this new life bring them peace, or mark the beginning of another storm? On a chilly morning, Diep took little Nee to school and then stopped by to visit James's mother, the woman who had once appeared right when Diep was most lost during her early, lonely days in this unfamiliar town. The small house carried a faint scent of ginger tea, warm and comforting, just like its owner. The elderly woman was busy arranging documents into an old fabric bag, preparing to meet a client. Her hands moved swiftly, yet the fine lines on her forehead revealed the traces of someone who had weathered too many storms in life. When the door opened and she saw Diep standing on the porch, holding a thick coat in her arms, her expression softened, not out of sadness, but relief. It was the look of someone who had just seen family after a long, weary journey. Diep stepped closer and gently placed the coat in her hands. "Winter's coming soon. I didn't know what color you'd like, so I chose red. I hope it keeps you warm." Red, the color of luck, but also of hope. The woman's hands paused for a moment. She looked at the coat, then at Diep, as if trying to understand how this young girl could be so thoughtful. "You didn't have to do this, Diep. You've got enough to worry about already." Diep smiled softly, her voice small but firm. "I know. But, if it weren't for you, Nee and I probably wouldn't have made it this far." The woman didn't respond right away. She simply ran her fingers across the fabric, her eyes growing deeper, not because of the gift, but because of what it meant. Diep hadn't forgotten what she had done for her and her child. In that quiet moment, the woman realized something James himself had yet to see. Diep didn't stay out of dependence. She stayed out of gratitude and kindness. Taking a deep breath, her tone softened. "James is a lucky man." Diep bowed her head, her heart warming. But just as she was about to speak, a question from the woman broke the stillness. "Tell me, Diep, do you and James truly want to build a family?" The air grew heavy. For a few seconds, Diep stood frozen. Outside, the wind picked up, lifting a few dry leaves into the air. She tightened her grip on her bag strap, her gaze wavering slightly. She didn't avoid the question, but she wasn't ready to face it either. "I'm not sure. I guess people only know what's right when they've reached the end of it." Silence. The woman said nothing, because that answer, though uncertain, was honest. She picked up the coat, ready to leave. "Then keep walking, child. Just remember, don't be afraid of mistakes. You can fix a wrong turn, but once you let go, it's hard to find your way back." The door closed gently. Diep stood alone on the porch, her mind swirling with unspoken thoughts. Behind every gift, there's a story. And behind every act of kindness, lies a heart quietly longing for peace. After leaving James's mother's house, Diep held a basket of ginger close to her chest and walked down the small slope leading to the morning market. The road was still damp with dew, the ground beneath her feet soft and moist. The winter morning chill bit through the air, so cold that every breath came out as a faint white mist. She pulled her collar higher and hugged the basket tighter, as if holding on to a small piece of hope. The sharp, warm scent of ginger drifted through the air, mingling with the smell of earth and the faint sweetness of morning mist, an earthy, honest fragrance that made Diep feel somehow strengthened. She paused for a moment, lifted her gaze to the still gray sky, and whispered to herself, "Today, I'll definitely sell it all." The market was already alive even before the sun had risen. The calls of vendors, the haggling voices, the clatter of metal scales, the sputtering of motorbikes, all blended into a symphony of everyday life. Diep slipped quietly into a small corner near the vegetable stalls, where the soft morning light fell just enough to warm the golden gleam of her ginger. She spread a piece of tarp over the damp concrete floor, still wet from last night's rain. The basket was set neatly in front of her. One by one, she arranged each piece of ginger with care, as if, in doing so, she was also putting her own life back in order. Each root was the result of many cold mornings, countless times digging, watering, and nurturing the plants so they wouldn't wither. To others, this might be just another day of selling produce. But to Diep, it was proof that she was truly starting over from zero. She didn't shout or bargain loudly. She simply smiled and said softly, but clearly, "Fresh homegrown ginger, ma'am. Makes a nice warm tea." Some people glanced and walked away. Others picked one up, frowned, and offered a price so low it was barely worth selling. But Diep neither complained nor frowned. She stayed calm, patient, because she knew that everyone at the market was trying to save every bit they could. To most, it was just ginger. To her, it was the first step toward providing for herself and her child. An old woman bent down, picked up a piece of ginger, and turned it in her hand under the dim light. "It's beautiful, dear. How much for this?" Diep answered gently, her voice trembling slightly from the cold. "If you'd like a few, I can give you a discount, Grandma." The old woman looked at her kindly, with the soft compassion of someone who had seen life's hardships. She paid in full, and before leaving, secretly placed a few small tangerines in Diep's basket. "Eat these to keep your strength up. Hard-working girls like you, heaven will bless." Diep froze. Not because of the tangerines, but because of that sudden, quiet kindness from a stranger. She bowed her head deeply, hiding the emotion swelling in her chest. The whole morning passed. The money in her pocket wasn't much, ginger sold cheap, and profit was little. But every crumpled bill was earned by her own hands. Each one was a step forward, a small but certain step into her new life. She tightened her grip on the basket, whispering to herself, a promise to her future. "One day, I'll have a bigger chicken coop. More rows of green vegetables. A life I can truly be proud of." And then she smiled. A quiet smile, yet strong enough to chase away the cold of that winter morning. That afternoon, as the sun began to sink behind the hill, its last golden light spilled across the dirt road like melted honey. The old bamboo grove lining the path cast long shadows across the damp ground. Diep was gathering the last few pieces of ginger left in her basket. Her hands were dry and rough, yet every movement was careful and deliberate. The sharp scent of ginger lingered on her fingertips, its warmth seeping into her wrists, easing the chill of the evening air. Another day had passed. No big profits, nothing extra. But for the first time in a long while, Diep felt a rare sense of peace. The quiet pride of earning even a few coins through her own effort. She pulled on her thin coat, hugged the basket to her chest, and started down the dirt road toward home. The wind carried the smell of straw, of ripe rice, of the damp earth at dusk. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed, and a voice called chickens and ducks back to their coop. Simple sounds, ordinary things. But now, Diep finally knew how to cherish them. After a while, she stopped. Beneath an old mango tree by the roadside, a dog lay curled up. The sunset brushed its golden fur with a thin layer of amber light. Its coat was dusty but still soft and clean, someone had clearly cared for it once. The dog lifted its head to look at Diep. No fear. No caution. Just a gentle, trusting gaze, round and bright as if it could speak. Diep set her basket down and knelt beside it. Her hands trembled slightly from the cold, but when she reached out to touch its head, the motion came naturally, soft, instinctive, unthinking. The dog pressed its nose into her palm and wagged its tail faintly. "Did you get lost?" Diep asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. No reply, only those same eyes looking up at her, filled with the kind of trust an animal reserves only for someone it feels safe with. She looked around. No one was calling its name. No one searching. Diep sighed softly and bent down to lift the dog into her arms. Its fur was warm and smooth, its small head nestled against her chest as though it had finally found where it belonged. When she reached home, Diep set the dog down on the porch. For a moment she just looked at it, then smiled. "You look just like Hockey, the dog James used to have." She sat beside it, stroking its back gently, and said with quiet conviction, "From now on, your name is Dawn." Dawn. A short, simple name, but warm, familiar. It was a spontaneous choice, yet in that instant, Diep felt as if she had added a new member to their small household. James was tidying up outside when he heard her voice and stepped over. He froze for a second at the sight, Diep crouching on the ground, the golden dog calmly sitting beside her, its tail wagging lightly with every word she spoke. The way Dawn looked at Diep reminded him of how Hockey used to look at him, with absolute trust and loyalty. Seeing him, Diep quickly explained. "It was lost. I brought it home." James stayed quiet for a few seconds. His eyes flickered, not from surprise, but from the weight of an old memory returning. Then he knelt down and tied a small rope gently around Dawn's neck. "He's calm. He'll fit in here." Diep smiled. James smiled back, not broadly, but softly, the kind of smile that comes when two people share something simple yet meaningful. Dawn drank eagerly from a bowl of water, tail wagging non-stop. Diep stood beside him, stroking his head while James straightened up and wiped his hands on his pants. "I'll clear the back corner of the yard later," he said. "We can make a little spot for Dawn there." No more words were needed. Diep followed him to the back garden, still holding Dawn's leash. The corner was overgrown with weeds, old flower pots, and a weathered wooden crate. But as the two of them bent down, cleaning, arranging bricks, and laying an old cloth in the box for a bed, the space slowly transformed. Not perfect. Not fancy. But it was the first place they had built together, with shared effort, for the same purpose. Dawn circled his new bed a few times, then curled up and rested his head on the fabric. He let out a long, contented sigh, as if relieved to have finally found a home. Diep stood there watching, her heart growing lighter. James stood beside her, saying nothing, but his eyes, too, had softened. No words were needed. They both understood. A lost dog had found its home. And maybe, just maybe, they were finding theirs too. As dusk settled, the sky faded into a pale orange before slowly dimming. The last rays of sunlight fell across the bamboo grove and the newly built fence. The small garden seemed to breathe with the quiet calm of twilight. Don lay curled in his little bed, sleeping soundly, his breathing steady and peaceful. James sat by the fence he had just finished. The wooden planks were still covered in sawdust, the faint scent of freshly cut bamboo lingered in the cool air. The sunset cast a golden hue across his face, revealing the tension he'd been hiding all day. He rested his elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, something was caught in his throat, unspoken. Finally, he said it, his voice low, rough, almost breaking. I'm not a director anymore. A few feet away, Diep was folding a towel. She froze, listening. James lowered his head, the words spilling out, heavy, tired, each one cutting deeper than the last. I don't have a company anymore. No assets, nothing left. Everything I built for years, just vanished. I'm afraid, you'll be disappointed. The evening wind stirred the bamboo leaves, their rustling filling the silence between them. James's confession was like a blade, not cutting into Diep's heart, but into his own. He couldn't look at her. He didn't dare. In that moment, Diep saw it clearly, behind his calmness, behind all his quiet effort, James carried a deep fear. A fear of being abandoned. A fear of no longer being someone to be proud of. A fear of becoming just a man with empty hands. She set the towel down and walked toward him. Sitting beside him, close enough to feel the uneven rhythm of his breath, she didn't rush to speak. She let a few seconds pass, letting silence do what words couldn't. Then gently, she placed a hand on his shoulder, small, but steady. I already know. James looked up, startled by how calm her voice was. Diep smiled, not the kind of smile to cover pain, but the kind that steadies a person. I love you, not your title. The words were simple, light as air, but they lifted the weight off his chest completely. She looked straight into his eyes and continued. Director or not, company or not, that doesn't define your worth. I didn't choose to stay because of what you have. I stay because I know you're a good man, a man who's not afraid to start over. James clenched his fists, his lips trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the feeling of being truly seen, truly accepted. Diep squeezed his shoulder gently, a quiet promise, needing no papers, no vows. We'll start over. Together. The wind drifted through the porch, rustling the bamboo leaves as if nature itself agreed. Don stirred in his bed, his tail wagging faintly, as though he, too, understood what had just passed between them. No more distance. No more fear. Only two people, both scarred, both once lost. Now choosing to walk toward each other again. In peace, and with sincerity. Hearing Diep's words, it was as if James had finally lifted a great weight off his shoulders, one he'd been carrying for months. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at the woman before him, the one he had once thought was fragile, only to realize she was stronger than anyone he'd ever known. Diep sat beside him, her hand still resting on his shoulder, small, yet steady enough to keep him from falling apart. The sunset bathed her face in warm light, reflecting in her calm, resolute eyes. And in that moment, James understood, sometimes strength doesn't come from grand speeches or big gestures. It comes from silence, from someone choosing to stay when you have nothing left. He looked at her for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, steady, no longer trembling. Thank you for not leaving me behind. Diep simply smiled, as if his words didn't need a reply. Because for her, loving someone had never been about conditions or possessions, it was about choice. Evening descended fully. A single light flickered on above the porch. Don lay curled up in his new bed in the garden, fast asleep on an old piece of cloth. The little house was wrapped in peace. James drew in a long breath, then stood up. He looked out over the small patch of land, the newly sprouted vegetable rows, the pile of bamboo waiting to be turned into a chicken coop, the bits of hope they'd poured into this place day by day. "We'll start again," James said quietly. Diep nodded. No grand promises. No talk of a rosy future. Just a simple, certain agreement. From nothing, they would rebuild everything. Brick by brick, nail by nail, coin by coin. With their own hands. They would start a small company. Create jobs for the people nearby. Let honesty and kindness guide the way. Not to prove anything to the world, but to prove to themselves that even after losing everything, a person can still stand up again. Because in the end, they both understood one simple truth. Happiness isn't about how much you have. It's about who's walking beside you. A warm coat may not make winter less cold. But a sincere heart, that's enough to warm the soul. Stay tuned for the next video tomorrow, to see where their journey of beginning again will lead.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người. Bây giờ thì mình vẫn đang trong quá trình edit video và chưa có hoàn thành. Và mình cũng đang đặt tên video mọi người. Hiện tại thì mình chưa có tìm được một cái tên nào nó phù hợp. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhiều hơn để kênh mình càng ngày càng phát triển hơn. Và cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều vì đã theo dõi kênh của mình trong thời gian qua. Xương nó kêu. Tạm biệt mọi người.